I'm Matt.
And I'm Rissa.
And we're here to coach you in how to have an exceptional life. Today, we're going to be talking about scarcity.
Oh, that reminds me. I need to go to the grocery store and get some more milk. I'll see you later.
So today, we're talking about scarcity.
What is scarcity?
So it's a great question, right? Scarcity is a concept. I think that's the key here, right? Scarcity and abundance are not reality. We approach life as if we know what there is a lot of and what there isn't a lot of. We don't approach life from the viewpoint of there is whatever there is. They're interpretations of things.
Okay, so you're saying like there is the reality of how much something there is, and then there's our concept of how much there is, and those are not always the same thing.
That they are never the same thing, right? And now it's perfect because it is our interpretation of things versus the way things are. And as human beings, we're always dealing with our interpretation of things, almost never how things are. So when we think of things as scarce, we have a natural reaction to them as animals, right? If a resource is scarce, we want to acquire as much of it as we can. If a resource is abundant, we don't care so much about it. We can share it or, not worry about it. But none of that is to actually address the reality of you have what you have, you don't have what you don't have.
I think a lot of like Catan and how, sometimes there are a lot of bricks around. And so, I'll trade you one brick for this thing. I might even trade you 2 bricks for this one thing. But whenever there's not any bricks on the board and I have all the bricks, I'm going to need 3 of your thing for my 1 brick.
I did not expect a board game reference, let alone to Settlers here. But yes, that's exactly right. What we want to talk about today is that focus, right? Is when I view things as scarce, I'm likely to behave a certain way. When I view things as abundant, I'm likely to react in a different way. Because as human beings, we rely on certain things that we need to survive: food, water, air, shelter, etc. But the interesting thing to me as a coach is we don't get weird if I start consuming more air than you do, right? Or if I go over to your house and I just fill up 3 glasses of water just in case it runs out. Those are things that would be odd because we view those things as abundant resources. It's not actually based on how important the thing is. It's how much of the thing do we think we have access to.
Definitely. I mean, we had that ice apocalypse several years ago. It was like 2021. And I remember one of the days hearing they were going to shut off the water in the whole city. You can't even guess how many containers I had full of water before that got shut off.
It's exactly right. People hoard toilet paper, or people, whatever we don't think we're going to have enough of, we have to gather it. And if you have an insufficient resource, absolutely gain that resource, right? But what most people encountered was they had way more than they needed because it's better to have too much than too little. When we view a resource as abundant versus scarce, we are able to share it. We don't have anxiety about it. When we view something as scarce, we get very anxious, we get very protective, and we start taking actions that seem odd to somebody who doesn't view that thing in that way. So we want to be focused on reality, not our interpretation of reality. But it's also useful to know, where does that interpretation of reality generally come from? And it almost always comes from something that's happened to us in our past.
Yeah, it's really connected to machinery, right? It's trying to keep us alive, safe, and past experiences can make us view things as scarce, even if they're no longer scarce.
Exactly. I know people who were very wealthy and now are of average means. they react to money completely differently than people that I know who grew up poor and are now of average means. Even though they're both in the same situation, one of them has a lot of fear and resentment around money because they've always had the experience of it being a scarce resource, while the other person is able to handle their finances just fine because they don't have it as a problem. They have what they have, they don't have what they don't have, and it works out fine. They both have the same reality, but they approach it from two very different viewpoints based on their past and their machinery.
Yeah, it's amazing how long those things can stay with us. I've been in my life way more capable of having food whenever I want than the amount of times that I had food scarcity as like part of my reality. And yet I still react to a lot of situations like the way that I did when things were scarce. I still worry about, where am I going to get food some point today? Do I need to have snacks in my backpack and, just be ready? If I go out to eat and there are, little free snacks or something, I better grab a couple just in case I need it for later. It's so funny how that is not my reality anymore, but it changes the behavior you have.
Absolutely. And it's the being conscious to that when that behavior, when those reactions do not serve you, that's what we want people to be able to be aware of and have control over.
Definitely.
Yeah. And again, this is always going to come back to one of the keys for all aspects of coaching, which is noticing our interpretation of reality versus what reality actually is. Life is very simple when we react to what reality is. Life can be very hard when we are constantly reacting to our interpretation of it and what we think about reality. And there are times where our interpretation of reality is wonderful, right? I go home, I see my partner, she has a smile on her face, I am loved, this is wonderful, right? But then there are other times where I walk in the door, she doesn't react immediately, she has a weird look on her face, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I guess it's over. And no, she has gas. Like, it's not a big deal. But the more that we can be present to, am I reacting to reality or my interpretation of it, we can change our interpretation. We don't change reality as a general rule.
Yeah, it's not what the past can't be changed, like what happened, but our view of the past can change. We talked about this in, creating without a past.
Absolutely. Go see that video. So, anything else you want to say about scarcity and abundance?
We talked a lot about how that can change the way that you interact with the world. We also did a different episode on generosity. I feel like this is really relevant to that. It's hard for us to feel we can be generous when we see something as scarce.
It's a perfect connection, right? We are easily able to be generous with things that we think are abundant, right? Oh, take as many glasses of water as you want, right? Yeah. It's very difficult for us to be generous with things that we think are scarce or that will be irreplaceable. And again, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's not good, it's not bad. But the more that we can just deal with what's so and deal with reality, the more power that we can have inside of being the person that we want to actually be.
Yeah, you could have a bite of my food, but it better not be a big bite.
Exactly, right? And look, I know people who, if you take their fries without asking, they lose their mind, right? But I know other people who are like, it's their fries, they make more. Like, it's not a problem. And being able to notice which of those are you thrown to be because you aren't any certain way, I don't want to say that's the person you are, is very useful.
Yeah, so the point is just to acknowledge it like the machinery and figure out if you want to make changes and have a different way of interacting with the world.
Exactly. Perfect.
I love it. What's their homework?
So your homework is going to be dealing with reality. I want you to spend the week looking at where are there situations where you think of something as scarce and where there are situations where you think of something as abundant. And in either of those situations, take 10 minutes and figure out what reality is. If you feel there's a scarcity around money, take 10 minutes and look in your bank account. How much money do you actually have? And notice that that's neither scarce nor abundant. If there's something that you think you have in abundance, like time, notice how much time do you actually have? Everybody gets 168 hours a week. What of it do you feel is free time? What of it is restricted time, etc.? The more that you can start to practice getting related to reality as distinct from your interpretation of reality, the more power you'll have in altering things.
If you have thoughts or comments about scarcity and abundance, we'd love to hear about it below.
As always, you can reach us at www.anexceptionallife.com/newsletter to sign up for our newsletter and hear more about our videos and other series that we're producing. You'll also be able to sign up for the 24 hours of coaching. And of course, if you're interested in finding out about doing personal coaching, the website's where you'll find all your answers. As always, your time and your attention are incredibly valuable, and you have given them very generously. We really appreciate it.